Before you judge me, let me tell you how I ended up here. On my 62nd birthday, I thought I was going out to lunch. I wore my best sweater, even curled my hair that morning. I imagined laughter cake, maybe a small dinner somewhere with my son. But instead of candles and joy, I was handed a suitcase and abandoned like old furniture no one wanted anymore. And that was just the beginning. If you believe betrayal only comes from strangers, wait until it wears your last name. I am Margaret Taylor, a mother, a widow, a woman who once believed love was enough to hold a family together. I had one son, Brandon, and for decades he was my whole world. Every scraped knee, every late-night fever, every school project glued together at the kitchen table, I was there. I believed a mother's love was unconditional, that no matter how hard life pressed, family would press back stronger. But life has a cruel way of testing even the strongest convictions. That morning, I woke up feeling hopeful, alone in my modest house in Dayton, Ohio. Yes, but hopeful. Brandon hadn't called much lately, always busy, always tied up with work, with his wife, with something that seemed more important than me. But surely he wouldn't forget my birthday. Surely my only son, the boy I had raised after his father died too soon, would remember. I made pancakes that morning, his favorite, set 2 plates, as though he might walk through the door. By noon, no one had come. The pancakes grew cold, my smile faded. Still, I refused to spiral. I checked my phone a dozen times, reread old texts just to feel some connection. Then the doorbell rang. Brandon stood there with a grocery store bouquet, his boyish grin pasted on like he was 10 again, and wanted forgiveness for breaking a window. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said stiffly. I smiled through the sting in my chest and hugged him tight. He smelled like aftershave and hurry. "Get dressed," he said. "I made lunch reservations." I didn't even question it. I grabbed my purse, slid on the shoes that pinched my toes, but looked nice. I felt giddy like a girl going to prom, believing this day would be special. But as we drove, the city lights didn't get closer. Instead, we pulled into a long driveway lined with maple trees, whose leaves were ash gold and red in the fall sun. At the end of the drive, a sign loomed: Willow Pines Senior Living Facility. My stomach twisted. "Brandon, what is this?" I asked. He cleared his throat. "Mom, we need to talk. It's not safe for you anymore. You live alone and with your memory lapses." "What memory lapses?" I snapped, heat flooding my cheeks. "I found a great place," he insisted. "It's safe, comfortable. You'll have people your age, activities." I laughed. But it wasn't laughter. It was bitter and hollow, the kind that makes your chest ache. "You brought me here on my birthday." He got out of the car and opened the trunk. My suitcase was already packed. My hands went numb. "You went through my things. Don't make this harder than it has to be," he said softly, almost pleading. But his eyes were cold. Inside, the facility smelled of antiseptic and overcooked vegetables. Smiling faces at reception, nurses bustling by, all a blur. Brandon handed over papers, legal papers with my name, his signature. Power of attorney transferred. Done. They led me to a room with beige walls, an adjustable bed, a small window facing a brick wall. My birthday gift. I sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing my coat, feeling the cold seep into my bones. No cake, no candles, just silence. Hours passed. I finally opened the bouquet. The flowers had wilted from the car ride, drooping like my heart. That night I lay awake, listening to the shuffle of nurses, the distant hum of televisions behind thin walls. The mattress was too firm. The sheets smelled of bleach. I replayed every conversation with Brandon, every loan I gave, every excuse I made for his failures. I thought of how many times I said yes when I should have said no, and something inside me cracked. The next morning I asked for my cell phone. The nurse told me my son had taken care of it, disabled the line, said it was too confusing for me. That was the moment I realized I wasn't here to be cared for. I was here to be erased. But I'm not as fragile as they think, not even close. For 2 days I couldn't eat, not because I wanted to make a statement, but because nothing could settle in a stomach that churned with betrayal. There's something about being treated like you're disposable that buries you in silence. Nurses called me sweetheart, darling, as if I were a child or a ghost. No one asked what I had built, what I had loved, who I was. To them I was just another number. But on the fourth day, something changed. A young nurse named Ruby came in, her braids tucked under her cap, kindness in her eyes. She checked my vitals and whispered, "You don't belong here." I blinked at her, startled. She smiled. "You're not lost. You don't seem like someone who's ready to give up." Tears stung my eyes. For the first time since Brandon left me there. For the first time, someone had seen me. Ruby's words lingered with me long after she left the room. "You don't belong here. You're not lost." They echoed in the quiet, a reminder that someone still saw me as more than a discarded old woman. That sliver of recognition cracked open something I thought had died, the will to fight. I started observing the residents around me. Some had visitors every weekend, grandchildren who ran down the halls with sticky hands and bright laughter. Others stared out of windows, silent and forgotten, their eyes dull from years of waiting for someone who would never come. I wondered which one I was meant to be. Had Brandon already decided for me? Was I just another story of a child who tucked away the parent who once carried him? On the fifth day, I received an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a simple birthday card, unsigned. Tucked between the folds was a lottery ticket. I frowned, confused, but a small note in looping handwriting said, "Play it. Trust me." My first instinct was suspicion, but curiosity won. The next morning, I convinced the orderly to let me watch the local news in the recreation room. The lottery numbers flashed across the screen. My breath caught as one number after another matched the ticket in my trembling hands. By the time the announcer revealed the jackpot, $42 million, my knees nearly buckled. I had won. The room buzzed with bingo games and television chatter, oblivious to the storm building inside me. I clutched the ticket, my heart pounding. I hadn't felt that alive in years. It wasn't just money. It was proof that the universe hadn't finished with me yet. Proof that fate still had a twist left in her book. But who had given me the card? My first thought was Ruby. She had been the only one kind to me. Later, when I asked her about it, she only smiled and said, "Maybe life wanted to remind you you're not powerless." She never admitted more, but in that moment, I decided she was my angel in disguise. I didn't tell a soul in the home. Not yet. Secrets are power, and after being stripped of every ounce of dignity, I wasn't about to give that up easily. Instead, I requested a private meeting with the director. When I slid the winning ticket across his desk, his jaw dropped. Within days, lawyers swarmed the facility. My power of attorney revoked, Brandon's hold on my life severed like rotten rope. The day I walked out of Willow Pines, I wasn't the same woman who had been dragged in. My steps were steady, my head high, my hands gripping that golden ticket like a torch in the dark. I rented a modest condo downtown, decorated it with flowers and colors that screamed of freedom. For the first time in months, I slept without hearing the shuffle of nurses or the moans of strangers in the night. Brandon didn't call. He didn't visit. Not until the newspapers ran the story of the 62-year-old widow who had won the lottery after being placed in a nursing home. Suddenly his number lit up my phone, buzzing with fake warmth. "Mom, I was just thinking of you. Can we meet? I'd love to talk." I almost laughed. The audacity of it. The boy who packed my suitcase behind my back, who signed away my independence on my birthday, now wanted to talk because I was worth millions. But I answered calmly, my voice steady. "Yes, Brandon. We can talk. Come by next week." When he arrived, Jessica, his wife, was on his arm. She wore a smile painted in desperation, the kind that cracked at the edges. "Mom, you look wonderful," she gushed, air kissing my cheek as though nothing had happened. Brandon nodded stiffly, his eyes scanning the room, already calculating what part of my new fortune he thought belonged to him. I served them tea in porcelain cups that had belonged to my grandmother. The silence stretched heavy until Brandon finally spoke. "Mom, I think we got off on the wrong foot. The nursing home was a mistake. We just wanted you to be safe." Safe. The word tasted bitter. They hadn't wanted me safe, they wanted me silent. Out of the way. Convenient. I leaned back, my hands steady around the teacup. "Tell me, Brandon," I said softly. "When you packed my suitcase without asking, when you signed papers to strip me of my rights, was that safety? Or was it abandonment?" His face reddened. Jessica tried to interject, but I raised a hand. "You left me there like I was nothing. and now you see me as $42 million. Which version of me do you care about? The room went silent. I could feel the weight of their greed pressing in, but beneath it all I felt something else control. For the first time in years, the balance of power had shifted back to me, and I knew exactly what I was going to do with it. I could see the hunger in their eyes the way Brandon's gaze darted to the silver frames on my shelves, the rug beneath his feet, as if he were already calculating what he could claim. Jessica sipped her tea too quickly, her hands trembling slightly, though she tried to disguise it with chatter about their mortgage and Brandon's new promotion. It was all theater. I had seen better performances in high school plays. Mom, Brandon said, finally clearing his throat. I think it's time we moved past what happened. Families fight, but blood is blood. We can help you manage the winnings. Financial planning is complicated. You need guidance. Guidance. The irony almost made me laugh. I had run our household on pennies after his father died. I'd stretched every dollar, worked 2 jobs, paid for Brandon's college, his wedding, even bailed him out of debt more than once. Guidance. If I hadn't guided him all his life, he wouldn't have had one. But instead of rage, I let calmness wash over me like steel under velvet. Thank you, I said softly. But I've already hired someone. Jessica blinked. Who? Ruby, I said, savoring the way her name rolled off my tongue. A young woman I trust. She's studying finance and she has more honesty in her little finger than you two have in your whole bodies. Their faces fell, masks cracking. For once, they weren't in control. The weeks that followed were strange. Brandon called constantly, sending texts that swung wildly between guilt and charm. We miss you, Mom. You know we only wanted the best for you. Can we meet again, just us? Jessica sent photos of dinners she claimed she wanted me to join, as though food could cover up betrayal. I ignored them, busying myself with lawyers, with accountants, with the dizzying new reality of wealth. The lottery win became a tool not for indulgence, but for justice. I made quiet donations to shelters, to libraries, to scholarships in my late husband's name. I walked through the city and felt invisible chains breaking. For once, I wasn't just surviving, I was living. But betrayal has a way of clawing back. One evening, as I was leaving the bank, I saw Brandon waiting by my car. His eyes were tired, his shoulders slumped, but his jaw was set. Mom, he said, blocking my door. You can't shut us out forever. Watch me, I replied coldly. His eyes glistened, but I wasn't moved. Jessica and I, we have debts. Real debts. If we don't pay, people will come after us. Please, you don't understand. You don't. I stared at him. Don't I? You left me to rot in a nursing home, Brandon. You signed away my voice. You wanted me gone because I was inconvenient. Now you want my money because you're desperate. I understand perfectly. His lips trembled. You're my mother. The words sliced through me, sharp as glass. For a heartbeat, I almost softened. Almost. But then I remembered the locked phone, the beige walls, the way my birthday had turned into a burial. Being your mother didn't stop you from abandoning me, I whispered. Now being your mother won't save you. He stepped back as though I had struck him. I got in my car and drove away, my hands steady on the wheel, even though my chest burned with grief. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window watching the city lights blur. Betrayal is a poison. It doesn't just wound, it lingers. I thought of the boy Brandon had once been, the boy who used to climb into my bed with storybooks, the boy who once swore he'd always protect me. Where had he gone? Or had he ever existed at all? Ruby visited the next day. She brought tulips, bright and defiant against the shadows in my condo. You're stronger than you think, she said, sitting beside me. But strength doesn't mean you can't grieve. Her words cracked the dam. I wept not just for what Brandon had done, but for what I had lost, the illusion that my love had been enough. Ruby held my hand and didn't let go. A week later, an envelope arrived at my door. Inside were court papers. Brandon and Jessica were suing me, claiming I was mentally unfit to handle my finances, demanding control of the lottery winnings. My hands shook as I read, but not from fear. No, it was fury, white-hot and cleansing. They hadn't just betrayed me once. They were determined to bury me twice. I placed the papers on the table, my eyes narrowing with resolve. They wanted a war. They would get one. But they had forgotten I had already survived the worst they could do. Now it was my turn. The day of the hearing dawned gray and heavy, as if the sky itself carried the weight of betrayal. I stood before the courthouse steps, clutching my bag like armor, my breath steady but my heart pounding with the ghosts of every sacrifice I had ever made for my son. Inside the courtroom buzzed with murmurs, but when I walked in, the sound dimmed as though the air itself bent around the storm I carried with me. Brandon and Jessica sat across from me, dressed neatly, their lawyer whispering urgently into their ears. Jessica's smile was strained, but she wore it like a weapon. Brandon couldn't meet my eyes. He stared down at his papers, at the lies they had bound together in ink, claiming I was unfit, fragile, a woman who needed to be managed. They were about to learn that fragility and fury are not the same thing. When the judge called us to order, Brandon's lawyer launched into a polished speech about my forgetfulness, my confusion, how they had only ever wanted what was best for me. I sat silently, my hands folded, letting their lies spill across the room like poison in water. Each word they spoke dug the hole deeper, though they couldn't see it. When it was my turn, I rose slowly. My lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Carla, handed me the stack of evidence we had prepared. I looked directly at the judge, my voice steady. "I am 62 years old," I began. "I built a life from scratch after my husband died. I raised my son alone, put him through school, helped him. When he failed, forgave him when he faltered. And this," I held up the papers they filed, "is my reward. On my birthday, they left me at a nursing home, stripped me of my rights and called it love." The room was silent except for the shuffle of papers. Brandon squirmed in his chair. Jessica's face paled. Carla then submitted the photographs, the bank records, the copy of the power of attorney Brandon had signed behind my back. Piece by piece, the truth unfolded. Then came the final blow footage from Willow Pines, showing me lucid, alert, perfectly capable of caring for myself. Not the confused woman Brandon and Jessica had painted, but the strong, steady mother who had survived their betrayal. The judge's gavel tapped lightly as she leaned forward, her gaze cutting through the lies like glass. "Mr. Taylor," she said sharply, "do you have any evidence that contradicts your mother's account?" Brandon's lips moved, but no words came. Jessica leaned in, whispering furiously, but it was useless. The silence was louder than any argument. The judge shook her head. "This case is dismissed. Mrs. Taylor retains full control of her estate and winnings. And I strongly suggest you to reflect on the meaning of family before you appear in my courtroom again." Her gavel fell sharp and final. As people began to file out, Brandon finally looked at me. His eyes were red, his face twisted with something between shame and rage. "Mom," he whispered hoarsely, "please." I held up a hand. "No more," I said, my voice breaking but resolute. "You had every chance. You chose greed over me." Jessica tugged at his arm, her eyes flashing cold fury, but I turned away before I could see any more. I had spent too long looking at their betrayal. I would not let it stain me further. Outside, the cold air hit my face like baptism. Ruby was waiting at the bottom of the steps, her smile small but fierce. She hugged me tightly, and for the first time in months, I let myself collapse into someone's arms without fear of being dropped. "You did it," she whispered. "No," I said softly, pulling back. "They did it to themselves." In the weeks that followed, Brandon tried again, letters, phone calls, messages through relatives. I answered none. Forgiveness is a gift, and some wounds don't deserve it. Jessica vanished from my life entirely, though I heard whispers she was drowning in debt, dragging Brandon down with her. I focused instead on what mattered. I created a foundation in my husband's name, funding scholarships for single parents who worked themselves to the bone to raise their children. I donated to nursing homes that treated their residents with dignity, ensuring others wouldn't face what I had endured. And slowly the bitterness began to fade, replaced by something steadier. Not joy, not yet, but peace. The kind that comes from surviving a storm and finding the strength to stand tall in its aftermath. But one truth remained: the deepest betrayal I had ever known had not come from a stranger. It had come from my own flesh and blood, and that scar would never fully heal. It has been over a year since that gray morning in court, and sometimes I still wake up with the sting of Brandon's betrayal pressing against my chest like a bruise that will never fade. I suppose that's the thing about family wounds, they don't bleed out the way other injuries do. They settle into your bones, into the places that once felt safest, and remind you that trust is not unbreakable. And yet here I am, alive, stronger. Not because I wanted this path, but because I had no choice but to walk it. My condo has become a sanctuary. Sunlight filters through lace curtains in the mornings, warming the oak table where I sip tea and write letters to people I've met through my foundation. Single mothers who remind me of myself 40 years ago. Widows who thought their lives had ended but now find hope again. Their words remind me that even from pain, beauty can grow. Ruby still visits sometimes with flowers, sometimes just with her laughter that fills the silence in my rooms. She never speaks of that lottery ticket, never admits what she did, but I think she knows I know. Maybe it wasn't her hand that slipped it under my door, but it doesn't matter. What mattered was that someone saw me when I was invisible. Sometimes salvation doesn't come in grand gestures. Sometimes it arrives quietly in kindness, in presence, in a reminder that you're still worth seeing. As for Brandon, I haven't heard from him in months. There are whispers from neighbors, debts unpaid, a marriage unraveling, a man drowning in the consequences of his own choices. Once that news would have broken me. Once I would have rushed to fix it, to save him from himself. But not anymore. I've learned that saving someone who chooses betrayal only pulls you back into their fire. Forgiveness is complicated. Some say it is necessary to heal, but I've learned that forgiveness can also be a chain, binding you to those who never deserved your loyalty in the first place. So, I choose something different: release. I don't forgive Brandon for what he did, but I release myself from carrying the weight of his choices. His actions are his own to live with. Mine are mine. On my 63rd birthday, I lit candles on a cake Ruby baked for me. It was small, quiet, just us and a few neighbors. No grand parties, no false smiles. And yet, it was the most honest celebration I'd had in years. As I blew out the candles, I didn't wish for more money or more years. I wished for clarity, for peace, for the strength to keep standing in my truth. Because here is the lesson I've carried through all of this. Betrayal may break your heart, but it doesn't have to break your spirit. Family may abandon you, but you can build new families from love, from kindness, from people who choose you without obligation. And age does not make you powerless. It makes you sharper, wiser, more dangerous than those who mistake your wrinkles for weakness. If you've listened to my story and felt the sting of recognition, if you've ever been discarded by someone you loved, hear me now: you are not disposable. You are not finished. The same strength that carried me through betrayal lives inside you, waiting for its moment. So stand tall, hold fast, and never forget you are worth more than the hands that tried to throw you away. If my story touched your heart, please like this video. Share it with someone who may need to hear it. Subscribe for more stories like mine and leave a comment below. Tell me, have you ever risen stronger from the very place where someone tried to break you? Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't in watching them fall. It's in proving they could never take you down.